Hello and welcome again to VW Feasts. Today we're making Stroganoff. Yes, back to the 1970s. Fab. So for this you will need, we're using pork tenderloin with some mushrooms and the onions, which are the base of the Stroganoff, sort of creamy sauce, and a bottle of brandy, which we will get to later. It's more or less at this point that someone forgot to turn the microphone back on, so you will hear no cooking sounds. So the onus is on me to burble away even more than normal. We've melted some butter into a pan, and then we're putting the onions in. We're nicely coating them with that butter, just so they're separated and just starting to go a little bit translucent. Yeah, the 1970s, the days of excess and flambés. What could possibly go wrong? I will say you may need a fire extinguisher for later. Once those are getting nicely softened, in go the mushrooms. Some beautiful fresh mushrooms we've got here. And again, coating them in all that beautiful unctuous butter. Yes, this was a time before we knew about cholesterol, when everything had butter and cream. The 70s. Get those beautifully coated, move them around the pan, make sure everything is glistening. Now we're going to add in some white wine and some stock. And then just let those simmer in that beautiful unctuous mixture. If you want, in this recipe, you could add a couple of extra elements that we're not going to. You can maybe add a little bit of citrus, a bit of lime or lemon, just to jazz it up, and maybe even a bit of cayenne pepper. Obviously, 70s had for simpler taste, and as long as it was lovely and rich, then that was enough. We're going to set it aside for a moment and use the pan now to cook the meat. So into the pan goes even more butter. And we're also going to add some oil as well. Butter obviously adds the flavour, and the oil allows us to cook at a slightly higher heat. Because we want to just sear and seal the pork. Could use chicken. We are using pork tenderloin cut into strips and cooked very quickly. You obviously want to do the same with the chicken, because this is a speedy dish, almost like a British stir fry. Of course, Stroganoff is not originally British, but as I said, at a dinner party in the 1970s, if you weren't having your steak Diane or your prawn cocktail, you were having Stroganoff. Just separate, make sure each one of those strips is apart and just sealed in that butter and oil. A little bit fiddly. You may consider making the strips just slightly smaller, so they're just purely bite-sized. We have big bites, so that's why there are big strips. Yes. What better than 1970s food? I remember the 70s very well. I used to go to Bernie Inns, and one of the options for a starter was a glass of orange juice. And that's what I used to have. I used to consider orange juice as a starter. What days were those? Now, the VW has got a slightly pyromaniacal bent. She loves fire. And this is the point where you will want to get either someone with a fire extinguisher or a fire blanket, or at least just know where the sink is to be able to get water on things. Also know where the smoke alarm is, because we're going to get fiery. So we're getting to the stage where those are now sealed, and we're just going to put them aside as well. We've got the juices in the pan, and to the juices we are going to add the brandy, and we are going to light it. What could possibly go wrong? Yes, big flames. You want to be careful with this one. We almost burnt the microphone. Luckily, I turned it off. So we're getting rid of the alcohol, which adds harshness, but keeping the brandy, which adds flavour. And then back in go all our onions, mushrooms, and the meat. And so we now have a very rich gravy, and then we're going to add the cream. You can also use a creme fraiche or a soured cream if you don't want to use purely just rich cream. The soured cream and creme fraiche will add a little bit more flavour as well. Back in the 70s, you'd never do that. You'd just use more cream. So, moving that down, cooking a while, making sure everything's cooked through and reducing it slightly, just so we have a nice, thicker, more unctuous sauce. And there you have it. Served with rice, it's pork stroganoff. Enjoy.